If business was all accounting and taxes, every business would be crushing it because they've got those people. We need those people. I'm game to have those people. But if it was just numbers, then everybody would have it figured out. We get the math. That's not what business is. It isn't. The make or break linchpin in business is a creative pulse.
Andy Pizza, podcaster, author, illustrator, speaker, all of the wonderful and creative things. Thank you so much for joining me on the Modern Mentor podcast today.
Super happy to be here.
You have an extraordinary gallery, menagerie of visual things happening behind you. What am I looking at? Like 10,000 feet in the air.
I love the word menagerie. I learned it as like a vocab word in maybe third grade. And I remember it stuck with me. And I've been just trying to fill spaces with menageries ever since. We got all kinds of stuff. I got some of my artwork, other things that have been sent to me over the years, stuff I've collected. I'm ADHD, a maximalist. I like all of that stuff and visual stimuli. And you know what else? I think a lot about like on the sports shows and news shows, everyone's like zooming in. And I want a whole psychological breakdown of Zoom backgrounds. Ooh. Like what they say about or what you're trying to tell people about yourself with these things.
I love that, except for the fact that anyone who can't see me may not know mine is just black. And so I am hoping there is not a metaphor in there, but I guess only time will tell, right?
We'll let the psychologist get to it. I can't touch on that.
So Andy, you are, like I said, super many things, but one of them is the host of the Creative Pep Talk podcast, which is where I first discovered you and fell very, very professionally in love with you. And so I have been looking forward to having you on this show, and I thought I would do a little bit of setup as to why, and then we can kind of get in there. So as you and I talked about in the green room, you are what I would consider to be a capital C creative or creator. You actually make beautiful things in the world. In my world, I work largely in corporate. My clients, my listeners are often or typically people in more traditional jobs. And, I think especially now in 2026, people's spirits and energies are feeling stretched and strained and just kind of low. And I think that we could all really just use a dose of creativity in our lives. And so I would love to explore that with you today.
I would love to talk about that. I have so many thoughts.
So why don't we start then with that little thing I did there with the capital C and the lowercase c, and tell me a little bit about what you think makes a person creative or a creative.
Yeah, I think even when people call me a creative person, a creative, if you will, I sometimes think I identify that way, and I do make art and I write books and all that stuff. So I guess it's true. But sometimes I feel like pushing back because I think people's definition of creative is just wrong. Like what we think of as creativity, I generally don't agree. I feel like usually we're talking about what I would call exploratory creativity, which is starting without knowing where you're going to go. And so John Mayer would call this Ouija board creativity. It's where the guitar is writing the song and the paintbrush has a mind of its own. And it's just, you don't know where it's going. You're going to be surprised. I think that's a valid type of creativity. I just think it's not the whole equation. And so for me, I think it's just as creative to solve a puzzle with what I would call strategic creativity. And so exploratory creativity is starting and you don't know where it's going to end up. Strategic creativity is the exact opposite. It's starting with the end and then working backwards. You know where you're trying to go, but then you got to creatively find a path there. And so that's my only pushback. And part of that pushback is everybody is really creative. I think everything that we do, it's a creative act. In fact, anybody that's like, I'm really not creative, I can't draw a stick figure, that kind of thing. I'm always like, yeah, but you dream at night. And dreams to me, I'm a big dream guy, dream nerd. I like to kind of trip out around dreams. I just really like them. But even if you have just not very many dreams or you can't remember your dreams, you still dream. You have to if you're human. And to me, what's so incredible about dreams is that this is proof that you're so creative, you do it in your sleep. In your sleep, instantaneously. You have storylines, characters, worlds that you just make up out of thin air. That's how creative humans are. And so I do feel like, yes, I am like an artist and also a creative person, but I think everyone has a lot more access to creativity than they really think they do.
I love that. I think that was a beautiful ode to what hopefully most of us are doing at night. I think it's great to sort of position it that way. And I love the way that you just talked about exploratory and strategic creativity. And
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people probably lean towards the John Mayer when they think about what creativity is. But I
Yeah.
love the way that you just laid out that strategic bit. It's a lot of what I feel like I bring to my work, and I would love to explore that a little bit for you.
Let,
So, for me, for example, a lot of what I'm hired to do is to deliver a talk or to design a leadership offsite or a retreat. And I am given a set of objectives, right? We want to get a team rallied around XYZ. We need to develop XYZ capability. And that can feel in some ways very confining and very uncreative. And
mm,
I think it is incumbent upon me to find a way to not just lecture people, but really invite them into an experience that is interactive, that uses different modalities. I like to activate different muscles, different parts of the brain. And so I think of what I do as a very creative act, even though people who may see my LinkedIn profile might strongly disagree. And so I would love for you to talk a little bit about how you think about strategic creativity and just how people can start to maybe embody some of that.
yeah, I think you touched on parts of it already really well. So, one aspect is, like you said, you might get a brief and you say, here's where we want the team to end up
Mhm.
at the end of this retreat. Okay, that's a strategic, creative objective, right? And the same is true with a stand-up comedian. A stand-up comedian goes into the club. They know what the objective is. The objective is everyone leaves laughing or
Right.
having laughed.
Right.
Like, how do I get there? That's a strategic, creative problem to have. And so that's exactly what I'm talking about. I encourage create. It's harder to get creative people, typically creative people, to exercise this part of their brain
Hmm.
for a lot of different reasons. But I think once you start being comfortable there, you realize, oh, it has so much power, so much potential. And then you really start to be able to access different parts of your brain when you need it. Sometimes you need the play, sometimes you need the editing, and you need to be able to do all those things. You also touched on this idea of this, like working these different parts of your brain, different muscles. And I think creativity is kind of like a sport of the brains. With swimming, people will be like, this is a full body
Yeah.
exercise. With creativity, it's a full brain thing. It's a whole brain activity. You have to involve the left and the right. And you have to learn how to kind of master and cultivate and kind of call up those different parts of yourself when you need them. And I think that what you're describing exactly is kind of a play between the right and left hemispheres. Whether you're starting and you don't know where you need to, like if you're starting with exploratory creativity, you start out, you make some marks, and then you have to make some sense of it. So now you're calling in the more like common sense side of
Mhm.
what you do. And the opposite is true if you're doing it the opposite way.
Yeah. 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 Really well said. And I love what you just said there about like you have to learn to access some of these. One of the things that I've heard you talk about is this concept of planting seeds. I
Mm,
think that was something you touched on in one of your more recent episodes, and it really struck a
true.
chord for me because it left me with the sense that um, kind of becoming a more creative person is sometimes just about, like you said, planting these seeds, having these practices and these rituals in your days and just kind of making space for it. And so I would love for you to just share a little bit about that philosophy with listeners.
Yeah, there's a couple. So this is just true for me, where I am aware of how I see the world, how I move through the world is dependent on what I'm consuming. It's very much like you are what you eat. I often say you art what you eat. So your art is a product of the stuff that you're taking in. Murakami, the author, said something like, if you read the same books as everybody else, you're going to have the same thoughts as everybody else. Austin Kleon says it, garbage in, garbage out.
Yes.
So when you think about making a change, if you want to be more creative, that might look like a creative hygiene overhaul. So if everything you're consuming is the same things that everyone else is consuming, you're going to have a similar output as everybody else. It's not going to be very creative. And if everything you're consuming is junk food, like Instagram Reels only or TikTok or whatever, you're not going to have any like deep, profound thoughts and experiences to share through your work. And so for me, that's what planting the seed looks like. It looks like making sure that you're actively being aware of what you're taking in. I also this is just kind of like my soapbox or something where I feel we should maybe be a little bit more careful with how much terribly violent stuff that we're consuming or terribly horrific things we're consuming. I don't have the science to back this up. I do know that like our mirror neurons make it so that when we're watching something, it is as if we're experiencing it. I just have this strong feeling that we're like every night, like time to relax on the couch, and then we're just going to traumatize ourselves, right? Like it's so bizarre. It's not that I don't watch anything that's violent or anything that's rated R or whatever. I do, but I just try to be mindful of what is my input diet. And I think if you want to have more unusual thoughts, it starts with letting your curiosity lead the way. The other thing I like to think about here is that, wherever you are, like whatever job you're in, the way that you're going to bring a unique thing to the table is putting your own twist on it. So everybody knows the movie The Sixth Sense. I'm not going to give away the spoiler if for some reason you haven't seen that, but I don't mean to brag, but I guessed the ending. Okay, the first time I saw it, I guessed it, and that sounds maybe impressive, probably not, but maybe it does. But I had a huge hint. My cousin, we go to the movies. He's already seen it. He leans over and he's like, this movie has the craziest twist. And so I knew there was a twist coming, right? I know there's a twist coming. So I'm looking for every thread that's out of place. And so that's how I put it together. It's pretty easy to guess the twist if you know one is coming. That's what creativity is like. Creativity is always a twist. If you want to be creative, if you want to create a creative thing to happen in your future, you need to be looking for the twist. That means being curious. And you're going to put your own twist on things by maybe you have a fascination with psychology like I do, or you have a fascination with film, or you have a fascination with sports or the Olympics or history. And I think that making sure that you pour into those curiosities beyond what seems relevant to your job, that is so essential to having a creative take. One of the interesting things you'll see is like a lot of the Nobel Prize winners in science all have these, a large percentage of the top scientists have a creative practice. They have this thing that has seemingly nothing to do with what they're doing. And it gives them the ability to put a twist on what they do. And so that's a big part of like making sure that you are, I try to be disciplined every month or so, I try to put together a playlist of new songs that have come out and make sure that I'm continuing even at 40 to like feed myself fresh things.
I love that. I think that is a really beautiful call to action. And there are a couple things that I'm taking away from that in particular. Number one, I sometimes have this debate with certain people, some of them who I'm married to, who do not believe in reading fiction, right? There are people out there who I think believe that reading fiction is kind of a waste of time. And it's fine. I feel like it's a waste of time to try to change their minds. But I really do believe that taking in stories and kind of living in the experiences, real or imagined, of people in other parts of the world, in other cultures, and other experiences just helps expand how we think. And I don't think, what I'm taking from what you're saying is that creativity doesn't have to mean, if I'm working on a pitch for a client or if I'm working on a healthcare protocol, it doesn't have to mean I'm adding an animation or a fresh, jingle to it. creativity can sometimes mean just thinking more expansively outside of your own experience, outside of the box, and bringing in a fresh lens of empathy, maybe even just being stronger at putting yourself in the shoes of the client or the patient. And so I would love for people to hear you talk and think more broadly about what does it mean to bring creativity into the work that we do. The other thing that's coming up for me, because you're quoting all of these amazing people, and I'm now thinking about a book written by Seth Godin, right? The famous marketer. He has a book, I believe it's just called Remarkable. And he talks
Yeah.
about the word remarkable and how we've sort of made it very colloquial and it kind of means cool or good. But he's like, no, what it means is be worthy of being remarked upon, right? So being creative doesn't have to mean you're like bouncing off walls in neon colors, but it means you are leaving an impression. You are creating a memory. And I think in the world of, whether you're in corporate or healthcare or nonprofit, a lot of what we have to do is influence people to bring them along on a journey with us. And I'm hearing a lot in here that I think people can really sink their teeth into. So thank you for all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the question of how this kind of applies. I think about that a lot. Like every week on our show, we have this creative call to adventure, which is about how to apply these things like right now. So I like that practical edge. I think that one way to think about creativity that is relevant to whatever scenario you find yourself in, whether it's an office or an entrepreneur, what have you, is the creative act is always a disobedience of the rules.
Hmm.
And so the way I like to think about this is in the hero's journey, there's always a moment where the hero has to disobey the guide to have their own path.
Mm-hmm.
So you can think about this like there's a moment in this, I think it's the second Star Wars movie, where Luke Skywalker tells Yoda, I'm leaving. And Yoda's like, your training's not done. If you do this, it's all going to go bad. Like, don't leave. Don't save Han and Leia. And he decides to leave. And that is the moment he becomes his own hero. That's the moment where he listens to his gut. That's where he finds his own journey. And the same is true in your field. The moment where you become indispensable is when all the people around you are thinking one thing and you know another thing and you go for it anyway. And sometimes you're going to get it wrong. That happens. But the reason you become valuable is because you have a perspective and a thought and a innovation that other people around you don't. And so you have to learn to trust that. And so to me, that's kind of what creativity could look like in the workplace. It's where you start to, yes, you start by fitting in. This is also true for artists. This is something that I see a lot of young artists struggle with. Like, the first part of the journey is finding the scene that you want to be a part of and then actually doing the work to learn the rules. It's not even that I think artists don't want to do the work. They do the work. They like to make stuff, all that kind of thing. But what they get afraid of is learning from other people, trying to get the basics. A lot of people starting out trying to write stories, they don't want to learn the structure because they don't want to be formulaic, all that kind of thing. And I don't feel like that's a valid fear, honestly. I feel like you want to learn the rules. You want to understand, how do I fit in here? How do I be a part of this? How do I stand on the shoulders of giants? Why do I need to reinvent the wheel? You don't. You need to start there. But then you can get stuck there because it feels really good to belong. It feels really good when you're in a genre and you're like, okay, we all do this. We don't use Comic Sans. That's what happens to designers. Like, that font is off the table. I know that because I'm part of the club. But at some point, if you want to get to a place where you are in a level of one, you have to be willing to be like, well, I actually like Comic Sans. So I'm the one who uses that. And so I think that can look like differentiating yourself within your field.
Yeah, I think that's really nice. And I think for some people, I think we need to grow into having the confidence to do that, right? I think
Yeah.
if you want to go into the field of design, maybe it starts with joining the club and hating Comic Sans because that's what we all do. But then at some point, be willing to question that, right? Be willing to now I've got the cred. Now I'm in the club. So where can I take a risk? Where can I just do a little bit of Comic Sans and see if the earth falls off of something, because it probably won't. Um,
Yeah.
and this is
And I think what can happen is if you will like, I'm really interested in like questions that take the negative stance and then flipping it because it hacks your negativity bias.
ooh,
It's easier to think of negative stuff, right? And so what you can do is think of your creative heroes or your business heroes and think like, okay, you love all these things. What do you hate about them? What do you feel like they are missing this? Like this, I hate when they do that, or that's the wrong move. I would never do that. That right there is telling you something about your critique. So in the art world, there's this. It's a philosophical book by George Steiner that I did not fully understand. I didn't get all the way through it. It was heavy, but there's this really interesting part where he's saying he was like a literary critic and philosopher, and he was saying that in a utopia, just imagine a utopian society where there are no critics. You're not allowed to be a critic. The only way you can critique a work is by making a different version of it. So you're like, oh, I like this movie, but I wish it would have ended this way. The
mhm.
only way you can share that is to remake that movie and then do a different ending, or rewrite that book with a different plot twist or whatever it is. And art and creativity is, again, this isn't an area where I think people get creativity wrong, where they think it's, oh, something out of nothing, where this is really more like taking something
Mhm.
and saying, here's my spin on it. I think they're getting this wrong. And you can do that in business too. You can look at, I know everybody has their mentors and guides and heroes in business. And you can say like, okay, you're a huge fan, but don't fanboy out all the way. Take a look at like, what do you think needs to be done differently? That's part of your point of view. That's your creative take.
Yes. And this has happened for me before. So,
Yeah.
I had an experience once where I was at a conference and I saw somebody I think very highly of giving a talk. And I thought his talk was fabulous. And
Yeah.
one of the elements in that talk was he had incorporated a very short video that he played for the audience. The video was in the public domain, and he played the video, and then he facilitated a quick debrief around it. And I thought that video was awesome, but I would have
Mm.
debriefed it differently. And the video was in
Yeah.
the public domain. I wasn't taking anything. And so I have since given talks where I have incorporated the same video, but I've done a bit of a different debrief. And I'm not saying mine was better, but it did feel more on point and more authentic for me. And
Yeah.
I
It gives
don't,
you your own take.
yeah. And I think, and
Yeah.
by the way, I never delivered a criticism to him. And I still think very highly of him. And I don't think my experience there um, diminished my feeling about him as a speaker. I think I learned from him. And I think for me and the message I want to deliver, I think I've improved on it. So I
Yeah.
love that as a creative
That's
practice.
exactly right, and I love that something instantly came to mind.
Mhm.
I think it speaks to the power of the negativity bias. I'm always trying to look for what's the negative version of the question, then you can flip it. You get something generative and interesting. I had a very similar thing listening to a talk from picture book makers that I really love, and they showed these two versions of a book that they did, and they went with one version, and I was like, no, the other version was very like maximalist, going back to my maximalist nature. And I was like, I would have done that. And it was really interesting because it made me realize, like, oh, I have a creative perspective. I have a point of view. I have a taste. And I can lean into that.
I think that's awesome. And I am, by the way, a native New Yorker. So
Yeah.
I am always wired to find the negative in everything. Give me permission to do that, and I will crush it.
Just don't stay there.
Got it.
That's
Got it.
great.
Okay.
Don't stay
Noted.
there. It's the same in anything, politics, business, whatever. Like I'm all for, it's so easy to know what am I against. And it's powerful. And I am not even against critique. The thing that I'm for
Mhm.
though is saying, okay, if I'm against that, what am I for? What would be it's the same with habit formation. It's
Yeah.
not enough to be like, what do I want to get rid of? I want to eat less. Well, how about just eating more healthy?
Yes.
Like that's actually much easier and inspiring. And it's action oriented.
Oh, it's awesome. So you've mentioned a couple times this concept of like fitting in, right? It feels good.
Mm,
It feels good to be part of a club or part of a crowd. And
yeah.
this is, and a lot of what I talk about in the workplace is the idea of tensions, right? We are always managing tensions. We never want to have 100% attrition or 0% attrition, right? The healthy place is somewhere in the middle. We never are going to be 100% prioritized, but we don't want to be 0% prioritized. It's always about kind of finding a balance point. And I've heard you talk about this navigating tensions between kind of fitting in and standing out. And I would
Yeah.
love, and I think we've touched on it a little bit, but I would love for you to address that directly, how you think about that, how you encourage other people to think about that.
Yeah. So I like what you're talking about with this balancing the tension and realizing that there is some kind of threshold. There's a line where, okay, this is the right level of tension. This is too much tension. And it reminds me of stand-up comedians. I'm a big music fan, a big stand-up comedy fan. I think I probably like both because they're creative worlds that I see a lot of parallels in, but I'm not really in either of those worlds.
Okay.
And so I get to kind of see it from the outside. And one of the things that stand-up comedians do when they're trying to find that line between fitting in with the comedy scene, fitting in with what is a stand-up comic versus an improv comedian or a comedy actor, like how far, like some stand-up comedians really push that until there's no punchlines. It's all just like being silly and weird, and they get kind of excommunicated from the scene because they're like, you're not even doing the thing. And so that line is tricky. And how they deal with this, I think, is really brilliant. And they do it through what's called writing on stage. Okay. And so writing on stage looks like, I have a hunch that this is new, this is interesting, this is maybe a unique point of view, but I need to see, is this going to work? Does this cross the line? Yeah, sometimes that means in a politically incorrect way. I'm not really talking about that. I'm talking more like, is this going to connect with the audience's expectations and defy them in a positive way? Or am I going to bomb and it's not going to work? And the thing is, we were talking about earlier, like, you are going to have these hunches, like I should disobey Yoda. I should try this. The company should do something we've never done before. You're going to have these hunches, but I would recommend not exploring that tension in a make or break scenario. You don't take these hunches and then put them in your comedy special. You write it on stage. You work it out in the clubs when there are no stakes, where they've locked up their phones. And what this looks like in the business world is projects. I'm a huge project guy. And so how can you start with, if your company will let you, if your boss will let you, will they let you start a little passion project that's not make or break, that's a Friday afternoon thing? If not, can you do it on your own? Can you do it before work? Can you just test these theories? Once you know that this hunch is legit, then you can start adding the stakes. But that's where I would explore pushing the boundaries and the tension, finding these little places where you can test it. For me personally, as an artist, this has looked like I've done project after project after project to kind of build my portfolio, the direction I wanted to go. So when I started the podcast, I'm ADHD. One of the things that comes with that is I can't do anything significant without being wholly bought into it. So I have to believe in it as a creative person, as a business person, and as a human. So when I did it, I was like, I want to help creatives. That was the baseline. I knew that I was all about that already. I was already telling all my friends every trick and tip that I ever learned. And so that was the baseline of it. But then beyond that, the reason I decided to do a podcast that was mostly solo episodes was because I wanted to create a project that tested my ability as a public speaker. I thought, I'm going to make 100 episodes of this show, and it's going to be like 100 talk portfolio that either proves or disproves that I'm good at this. And if it proves it, people are going to start giving me jobs. And if it disproves it, at least I know I can cross that off. Like, that's not really for me. And I had experiences like that too. Like, I did a project where this was years ago before I started reading fiction.
Okay.
I read more fiction now for the same reasons you were talking about. But before, this was in my mid-20s, I thought, oh, maybe I could be like an illustrator that makes book covers. And I thought, I'm going to make these books from the public domain. I'm going to redo their covers. And so I did Wizard of Oz, and I did 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and then I did Moby Dick. And I put some of these online, and someone commented on Twitter. They said, hey, how'd you like Moby Dick? And I was like, oh, I'm supposed to read the books. And so that's what I realized. Like, oh, that's a project where I realized, like, oh, this is not for me. This hunch wasn't a good hunch. And the best thing about it is not that it crashed and burned, but that I learned I could turn that voice off in my head that said, this is cool. This could be a thing. Like, well, actually, I tried that. It's not a thing. Let's turn that off. And so instead of like staking my whole career on this and rebuilding my portfolio and being like, this is what I do now, and emailing all these art directors, I found a little project to test that theory of, is this a right way to push that boundary? So I think you can do, in great job opportunities, you have bosses that will allow for spaces like that. There are classic examples of things like 3M. I believe like Whiteout was made with some of that kind of like they had space for their employees to try things. And you can also request a little space, just a couple hours a week even, to like, hey, I want to see if we start doing this, if we see like a little bit of a return on that. And then if that works, you can roll it into something that is company-wide or team-wide or what have you.
That is totally fair. And I would say the same. And I'm seeing the same. And it's interesting because one of the things, so a lot of my work is with leaders, fairly senior in the organization. And one of the things they are struggling with most these days is just overwhelm. I feel like I'm carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. I am supposed to be driving results. I'm supposed to be figuring out AI. I'm supposed to be engaging my team. Like, I don't know when I'm supposed to do all of these things. So I can barely do anything, right? And there's such extraordinary overwhelm. And what I am continuing to try to convince them of is you don't have to do it all alone. You don't have to know all of the answers. And I think one of the most powerful levers that too many leaders are missing the opportunity to pull is give your team the opportunity to play with it. If you're exhausted from running all of these meetings, give team members an opportunity to run it their way. Hand them the agenda, not necessarily the client pitch, to your point, not the high stakes meeting, but like, hey, your team meetings, hand that off to somebody else. Give them both the opportunity to try it differently. Stakes are low. It's just your team. There's no clients. There's no money on the line, while taking something off of your shoulders. And I think there's such a missed opportunity right now to use opportunities to invite people to be creative, to try new ways of doing old things and seeing if we get a better result and create a little bit more room for leaders to breathe. And so I think there's something incredibly powerful. And I see people do really, really creative things. I remember very early in the pandemic, I had a leader who handed it off to somebody else. He gave one of his team members the opportunity to start leading meetings. And one of the elements this younger leader brought in was what he called a self-care share circle. Again, early in the pandemic when a lot of us were really struggling. And he brought in, it was a 5-minute icebreaker. And he said, each week we are going to start the meeting with sharing one self-caring thing we did for ourselves that week. And cool. It was awesome because it took a load off of the leader. Now the leader had delegated this to somebody else. This younger leader on their team had the opportunity to experiment, to try something new. And it not only invited people to actually do something caring for themselves, it kind of forced them to, because now there was an accountability, right? So somebody tried something creative. It had a really significant impact on the team. And that tradition holds today. This team still uses that icebreaker. And so again, I think your point about just low stakes, trying something new. These days, I'm seeing organizations give people just little playgrounds or sandboxes to play with AI in, right? We're not putting any customer data in there, but like, go play with the tools, like just see what it can do so that when we are ready to build it into our products, we've built some skill, right? And it's fun and it can be all of these wonderful things all at once.
I love that on so many levels. The first level is it gets back to a little bit closer to how I think of creativity. We think of creativity as like do something that's never been done. Well, something that's never been done is just the way that you see things, just the way you move through the world. It's never been done. And so for me, creativity is as much of like efforting this innovation as it is just showing up with your unique point of view and having the confidence and bravery to share it. And when you allow team members to carry these different parts, you're going to get a kind of creative symbiotic thing where everyone's bringing their own thing and you then are free to bring your thing and you don't have to bring all the other parts. The other thing I like about it, this is another thread through what we've talked about on the fiction side. So I do a lot of talks and go and talk to teams about storytelling because I'm an author and a podcaster and a public speaker. And so story is like central to everything that I do. And even my illustration, I think of illustration, my favorite definition of it is writing with pictures. And so I love that. And so for me, it all comes back to story. And I think that the manager or the CEO or the leader who is feeling overwhelmed, the weight of the world is on their shoulders, it almost feels like a lack of other stories, right? So one of the central stories that we tell, especially in Western culture and have done for the past 30 years through movies, is the hero's journey. I'm a big fan of the hero's journey. There's so much interesting stuff there, but it's just one archetype. There are so many other archetypes. And the thing about the hero's journey is this is one person. They have to do it on their own to the degree where you'll see like in Interstellar, there's two people going into the black hole and he's like, sorry, I have to let you go home. And he sends her out because I'm the only one that can do this. I have to sacrifice myself to do this. That's the hero's journey. And there's a time and place for it. Like I think in your 20s, when you're trying to build your ego and prove that you're an individual and all that, yeah, you do need to show only I can do this. This is something I can do without anybody's help. Yep. There's a place for that. But then I think we need things like fiction author Gail Carriger's heroine's journey is like, it's the opposite story. It's a story that says the only way this thing can get done is if we do it together. And she makes a good argument to say like Harry Potter is a classic heroine's journey. The only way we're going to beat Voldemort is if Harry, Ron, and Hermione all bring their stuff to the table. And yeah, there's still a leader, but we're all showing up with our own creative points of view.
That is so fabulous. I am writing that down, and I feel like whoever is going to be my next client is going to hear something about that. So
yeah,
you've been warned.
It's a great book, Gail Carriger's Heroine's Journey. It gives a whole kind of other archetypal look at storytelling that is really, really fascinating and I think really needed in our culture. We need to kind of inject a little bit of the we versus me kind of thing rather than just solo person on a mission thing.
That is so fabulous. And not to belabor this point, but I do think that there is a creative muscle that we need to be able to activate to incorporate more points of view into how we move forward. And I do think that moving forward as a collective is just naturally a more creative way to move. So
I agree.
I love that. Andy, as we come to a close, because I do want to be respectful of your time, is there anything burning that I have not asked you that you feel like you just want to leave listeners with beyond, please go listen to Andy's podcast, Creative Pep Talk?
I think the only thing I'll end with is I feel like I'm constantly trying to get creative people to see how valuable they are in business and tell business people how creative they are. You know, for me, as I was starting out, when I first started, I was just flying by the seat of my pants, taking the next opportunity, what have you, until that ended in nowhere, being in a place I didn't want to be, right? And I had to get strategic. I had to think in a bigger way, in a bigger picture. And I often say my rock bottom as an artist, for some people, it looks really bad. For me, it was really, really bad. I started reading business books. And marketing podcasts and marketing magazines and stuff like that. Like really, you're not supposed to do this as an artist. And the thing that I realized was almost all of these folks that are celebrated in business are like creative, neurodivergent, weird thinkers that are just totally different. And to me, it's just like the takeaway is embrace your unique point of view. Like if business was all accounting and taxes, every business would be crushing it because they've got those people. We need those people. I'm game to have those people. But if it was just numbers, then everybody would have it figured out. We get the math. That's not what business is. It isn't. The make or break linchpin in business is a creative pulse, like having a sense of like, what is the human quality of this? And as we're looking at all the AI stuff moving in and everyone's freaking out, and rightfully so. It's a terrifying and kind of mind-blowing technology. I'm not saying it's not, but to me, I just feel so certain that the key component is going to remain the same, which is the key is tapping into the humanity side, the creative side, and that you as a business person can do that.
Beautifully said. I totally agree. Andy, it has been such a pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Tons of fun. Great questions. Had a great time.
Amazing. Take care.